wing here. The general officers would have moved out here in the mid-1870s south of here, because the whole role of this fort changed in the 1870s to 80s. So we're going to go into these barracks. These barracks are actually a recreation of the enlisted men's barracks, not so much the officers. There were 117 cannon over there. And when we get on outside, I'll mention the top tier had 40 cannon, 24 pounders, and a couple of mortars on the second tier. Bottom tier had 42 pounders. I mean, huge cannon. And they're all muzzle loaded. They were all manned by at least 8 men. And they were not particularly accurate. What you're going to do is, if you throw 117 rounds at the same time, you're going to hit something. But by 1870s, 1880s, ironclads, steam vessels made the muzzle-loaded cannons here obsolete. And so this was abandoned because you didn't need it. They took all of the cannon, either sold it for scrap or threw it in the bay, and moved to rifled, breech-loaded weapons south of here in 5 batteries. And so when we get over to the casemate and I show you the cannon, I'll show you what it was replaced with, which was far more accurate, required fewer men, and I mean, you didn't need the wall anymore. And that's I mean, what it came down to. So this became more of a training station, a fortress, because you still needed to maintain the batteries south of here. I mean, but there's fortifications south of here that are unbelievable, that became obsolete fairly quickly because of technology. So, yeah. A couple of weeks ago, we had Civil War reenactors stay in the weekend, and they were firing their four-pound cannon and mortar outside here, firing their muskets to the delight of everybody here, which was pretty fascinating. But they ended up staying in these bunks. The lighting and the electric heat is obviously not from that period of time, but this arched ceiling, this arched brick ceiling is throughout the fort. This was the main structural strength, because on top of us is concrete, and there would have been cannon up on top of us, in addition to perhaps the remblai or all the grass. So this would have been a punk room. This is also used as a green room for our music festivals. We have the jazz festival here, the folk festival, end of July, early August. So a lot of the performers will come in here and hang out. Over here is our mess hall. I know that this is was originally a mess hall because that fireplace has a Dutch oven on the side, not the big cast iron, that little Dutch oven on the side. But let's say you're having your lunch and all of a sudden a bugle calls and it's an alert. These positions would be manned. This embrasure would not have had this. But this is part of the renovation here. This is where a howitzer would be rolled in, and we would be utilizing that active killing zone. Any movement outside, we'd shoot at it. But to give you an idea, if you take a look through these rifle ports, you can see the very limited area, degree of view that these people had. So, every room, I think, almost every room in the fort is an active defensive position, because it's a fort. But also, too, you know, architecture's not bad. One thing that they did not do in here, and we can tell if you look at the ceiling, up in the ceiling it appears that there are wooden blocks along with the brick, and they are. There would have been nailers, and you would have nailed the rafters to that, and we'll see that when we go down the wing here a little bit. They would have nailed rafters then to put plaster lap. This room would have been totally plastered. Because this would have been the officers' area. Even the enlisted men's areas were plastered over when we get to that side of the curtain. Actually, breech-loaded cannon, smokestack. These are ironclad. This was a fake war game between the Navy and the Army back in the 1880s. And so you see these ships coming in here with fully rigged, you know, man of war. This could be the USS Monongahela for all we know, which was stationed here in Newport. But this breech-loaded mortar, and these were, became the standard after we got rid of the muzzle loaders like this. because the muzzle loaders were not particularly accurate, and they could throw a ball about a mile, but the breech-loaded cannon could throw it more, they had a rifled barrel and it could throw more like 2.5 miles and hit whatever you're shooting at. Now the quick note here is going to be some of the people who were stationed here. Ambrose Burnside, who's probably best known for his facial hair, sideburns, was stationed here as a lieutenant. He became Major General of the Army and was in charge of the entire Union Army during the Civil War. And then it was taken over, Grant took over for him. But what's really interesting is this fellow here, Pierre Gauthier-Toton Beauregard, was stationed here until the Civil War when he became a general for the Confederacy. So a lot of these folks knew each other during the Civil War, where they would have had to fight each other as well. So throughout all of these different pictures, one of the things that I want to keep in mind is, it's not on this, it's on one of these placards, there's a picture of a music book. And if you think about maybe 1910, oh no, 1917, World War I. And these fellows have come from all over the country, and what they did is, you know, they're young men, they're 18 years old or whatever, and they would get together on their off time, and they would, you know, like play baseball, or they would play football, or they would have running races, or they would have relays or whatever, but also they got together and sang. And there's a book out here called Songs of the Soldiers and Sailors, and it was issued to all the servicemen in World War I. And they were expected to know 8 of the songs, and one of the songs in there cracks me up. It's one of my favorites. It's a song about who you met when you first got to a fort, and it was the barber. And with your indulgence, good morning, Mr. Zip, 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 with your haircut just as short as mine. Good morning, Mr. Zip, 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 you're surely looking fine. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust, if the camels don't kill you, the Fatimas must. Good morning, Mr. Zip, 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 with your haircut just as short as, your haircut just as short as, your haircut just as short as mine. It's one of the songs these guys would have sung together. And they were supposed to know America the Beautiful, My Country 'Tis of Thee, the Star-Spangled Banner. There was a phonetic version of the French national anthem in there, and the French soldiers were delighted when Americans got over and started singing it. Oh. And so the whole idea was to create camaraderie. The other songs you were supposed to know are considered pretty much racist anymore. My Old Kentucky Home, Old Black Joe, Roll Jordan Roll. But it was fascinating that those were 3 of the songs that the soldiers were expected to know, because they do provide a sense of community. Unfortunately, it's rather racist anymore, but at the time, it was perfectly acceptable. So we're going to head on down to the officers' quarters, so we're going to go out this way. And Sock Monkey is not original to the fort. But Sock Monkey was left here this summer, and we left him here because he connotes that children lived here. In 1900, there were over 100 kids, almost 100 kids living on the fort. This is probably the commanding officer's apartment because of that rosette on the ceiling. There are rosettes in each one of these apartments, but this is the fanciest one. Not a symbol of rank, but it's just because it's so fancy. So this room here probably was like the parlor or the greeting room. And you can see that the architecture in here is pretty nice. I mean, the crown moldings, and you know, okay. And you know, we have retractable shutters in the windows to protect. I don't know if I can get these open. Give this a try. It's stuck every so often. But maybe not. Anyway, these used to open all the way up to protect the windows. These are pocket doors over here. You can see there's evidence in the baseboard and some other places of electricity being added, probably in the 1880s or 90s. As we head over here into the dining room, here are the pocket doors. Here's some really scary looking wires sticking out. But if you can imagine this, you're having your dinner, and all of a sudden the alarm goes off, the bugle calls. They clear the table, riflemen come into these positions, the women and children go out to the parade, and the commanding officer would have stood about right here. and shouted out his orders, because all of the doors along the wing would open up and his adjutants would be standing in their apartments as he gave the orders. We understand that the Wi-Fi here was pretty bad in 1880, but this is how it was done. The floor you're standing on is on top of an 8-foot thick slab of granite, because underneath us is a room that is 50 by 20 by 5 that is lined with granite. It was the gunpowder magazines. And they put the gunpowder on the eastern side because this would have been the safest place, would have been the last place under attack. So if we're hit by a shell, they would have had to get by the west wall, through the southern defenses, past the north wall, and they're not getting that far. Nobody's getting that far. So a friend of mine came in here one time and I said, what do you think? How much would it cost to renovate this room? And he said, took just a quick estimate, he said, if everything's structurally sound, just to do the plaster, repoint the masonry, you know, if you don't want anything really fancy, and then somebody else said, and you could make this crown molding using 3D printing, he said about $150,000 per room. And so we have a whole bunch of rooms. These are the two that I would hope that they're going to clear up. These other rooms are a little too dangerous to go into. The ceilings are falling. I mean, if you want to see it, when we go out, just take a look at that room in there, and nobody's going in there without a hard hat. I'm not going in there. So, again, first garrison in 1841, and given that it was open for 35 years, it's pretty good shape. I mean, so we hope that this will be renovated. Yeah.